What happened in the year 1957? Everything I talk about in this video is specific to the year 1957. Before the main feature, I'd like to tell you about the comics and cartoons that debuted this year. Comic strip debuts of 1957. Andy Capp. This is an extremely funny comic strip from England that also became popular in America. The name of the character is a play on the word handicap, which is exactly what Andy is to his hard-working wife, Flo. He doesn't work. He's always drinking, gambling, and smoking. He flirts with other girls at the bar. Andy really isn't a very good husband to Flo, who cleans houses for a living. They occasionally get into big, cartoony fights. Still, the two like each other. Although kids can read the comic strip, it certainly wasn't made with the intention of being put into kiddie cartoon shows. It's Only a Game. Charles Schulz, creator of the legendary Peanuts, made this sports-themed cartoon panel that only ran until 1959. Why did it flop? Peanuts had been around since 1950 and was doing well at the time. He also did a Christian-themed cartoon panel called Young Pillars for Youth magazine, beginning in 1956. Schulz had the star power, but It's Only a Game only appeared in newspapers 4 times a week. A lot of newspapers weren't interested in carrying a panel that couldn't appear Monday through Friday and Sunday. On top of that, Peanuts grew increasingly popular by the late 1950s, so he needed to concentrate more on that strip. Of the 3 comics he was working on at the time, It's Only a Game got the axe. The characters in this strip look a lot like the Peanuts children, but are mostly adults. Miss Peach, a great comic strip. Miss Peach was the lead character of the strip, but the kids are the real stars. She is a likable school teacher who usually sets up the punchlines for her students. During the school year, the strip is set inside Kelly School. During the summer months, the location was changed to a summer camp, Camp Kelly. The strip ran until 2002. On Stage. Later retitled to Mary Perkins on Stage in 1961, and is better known by that title. It was created by Leonard Starr, who previously worked on comic books. This strip was a success for him, and it ran through 1979. He ended the strip only because he got the chance to take over the Little Orphan Annie comic strip, a more lucrative job. On the outside, it would seem like just another soap opera strip. A woman comes to New York to become an actress. Yawn. In fact, it had a lot of adventure and humor in it. Mary's stories were quite fun to follow, and gave you some suspense while never going to a very dark place. Sir Bagby. I mentioned this strip not because it was popular. It wasn't. But it's a curiosity. It actually ran for 10 years in a small number of American newspapers. The strip was set in a fictional medieval kingdom, with its main character being a knight. It had a kooky cast of characters including a king, a wizard, a jester, and others. The strip of Sir Bagby resembled the earlier strip of King Aru that ran from 1950 to 65. Neither one of these strips were extremely popular. However, The Wizard of Id debuted in 1964 and became a smash success, still running as of 2023. Timing is everything, and apparently The Wizard of Id came out when people were ready for that kind of humor. Sir Bagby, on the other hand, has barely seen the light of day since 1967, only being reprinted in the Comics Review magazine. Comic book debuts of 1957. The Charlton publisher introduced their version of Billy the Kid this year. He made his first appearance in Masked Raider number 6. Pretty soon, Billy the Kid took over the series, and from number 9 to 153, the series was put in his name, lasting through 1983. This was a fictional but good version of the real-life outlaw. In the comics, Billy had reformed and became a hero. Harvey Comics introduced Hot Stuff the Little Devil with his very own comic book series. He became one of Harvey's most popular characters. His features resembled Casper the Friendly Ghost, as did his premise. Hot Stuff was a mischievous but friendly little devil. He often performed good deeds that irritated his demon kinfolk. These were good, funny, kid-safe comics, and not the least bit evil, despite the fact that a devil is the main character. Stumbo the Giant is one of the unheralded characters of Harvey Comics, but appeared quite a bit in their titles. He is best known as a backing feature in the Hot Stuff title, but he was given his very own comic book series from 1963 to 66. He's a funny, friendly giant, drawn well with good stories, but he just didn't stay in the public consciousness like Casper, Richie Rich, Hot Stuff, and Baby Huey. DC Comics introduced some new characters this year. The Challengers of the Unknown team made their first appearance in Showcase number 6. It was created by Jack Kirby. Later on, in 1961, Marvel Comics had their first major success with the Fantastic Four. Jack Kirby worked on that title with Stan Lee, who continues to receive sole creator credit. One of the biggest disputes between Kirby and Lee in their infamous feud is that the Fantastic Four ripped off Challengers of the Unknown. This argument certainly has merit. DC also took over the title Black Hawk from Quality Comics, beginning with number 108. Since then, Black Hawk is largely thought of as a DC property, although it had existed almost 16 years before they got a hold of it. The Black Hawk Squadron was an elite team of aviators and commandos who fought during World War II and the Cold War against a wide variety of menaces. Another big step DC took was the creation of Easy Company in 1957. They were a U.S. Army combat unit during World War II. They first appeared in Our Army at War number 61, but weren't hugely popular at the time. That changed in 1959 when their leader became Sergeant Rock just 20 issues later. It wasn't until 1977 that Sergeant Rock got his own title, but Sergeant Rock and Easy Company were some of the most popular war comics ever made. Another big DC character introduced was Captain Cold, a villain for the Flash in Showcase number 8. He is still one of the most popular Flash villains. A famous French comic book series came out this year called Michel Vaillant. It is about a French race car driver and sportsman who competes mostly in Formula One. These are adventure comics that became hugely popular in France and other countries as well. In America, his name is often Americanized to Michael Valiant. Over the years, France has put the character into a live-action TV series, a cartoon series, even a live-action movie. It is still more popular in France and the rest of Europe than it is in America, but the comics certainly have its American fans. Although it's a fictional series, it is highly praised for its realism of automobiles and the racing world. Cartoon debuts of 1957. The animated musical segment, Let's All Go to the Lobby, is first played in theaters, signaling the intermission breaks. It was directed by Dave Fleischer, formerly of Fleischer Studios, famous for their Betty Boop, Popeye, and Superman cartoons on which Dave worked. This little 40-second cartoon ditty quickly became a major pop culture icon and has been heavily imitated and spoofed. Who doesn't like singing and dancing concessions? It has even been selected for preservation in the U.S. national film industry by the Library of Congress. For all of time, people will be able to see a quality print of this happy little commercial. The Woody Woodpecker Show from Walter Lantz debuts on television. This was quite a good show. Not only did it feature the classic Walter Lantz cartoons, but Walter himself appeared a number of times throughout the show with fascinating segments on animation and history of all topics. It ran on network TV for 20 years, and reruns of the show were played in syndication for years after. It also allowed Walter to keep releasing new cartoons in theaters until 1972, that would later be put in the show. Walter Lantz also debuted some new characters this year. Wendy and Breezy were father and son bears who made their first appearance in Father and Son, a Woody Woodpecker cartoon. Wendy is a big, full of himself bear, idolized by his little cub. Despite the fact that they are familiar characters for the studio, they only made 5 cartoons, with the last being released in 1959. Another Walter Lantz character that you'll hear people talk about is Pepito Chiquito, but he made only one appearance in The Bongo Punch. In this cartoon, Pepito Chiquito is a Mexican fighting chicken who would rather play the bongo. Merry Melodies was another big studio that introduced a one-shot character with Millicent, the fat girl rabbit who chases Bugs Bunny in Rabbit Romeo. She did, however, make another appearance in the 1979 TV special Bugs Bunny's Thanksgiving Diet, and since then was in an episode of New Looney Tunes. However, in the classic era of Looney Tunes Merry Melodies, she appeared only once. Disney came up with a unique character this year. His name was Fresh Up Freddy, and he was the animated bird spokesman for 7-Up commercials. 7-Up was also sponsoring Disney's Zorro TV show at the time. What kind of bird was Fresh Up Freddy supposed to be? It's never specified, but most likely a rooster. He was actually a mashup of 2 characters from Disney's much earlier film, The Three Caballeros. Panchito Pistoles was a Mexican rooster, and the Araquan bird that was purposely made to be unique. Put them together, and you have Fresh Up Freddy. Famous Studios collapsed in late 1956, becoming Paramount Cartoon Studio. In 1957, Paramount started releasing their first ultra-cheap cartoons. Although a few of the older characters like Casper the Friendly Ghost, Herman and Catnip, and Baby Huey were kept on, budgets were slashed to ribbons, and the cartoons don't look or feel much like the earlier entries. The Adventures of Tintin makes its TV debut. This cartoon series was actually based on the comic book series from Belgium, one of the most popular comics in Europe of the 20th century. Tintin is a boy reporter who has fantastic adventures with his little dog Snowy. Made originally for TV in Belgium and France, it was soon shown on American television and had big-name voice actors like Dallas McKinnon, Paul Frees, and Larry Harmon. The MGM Cartoon Studio, famous for Tom and Jerry and Droopy, closes down. It was not a wise move for MGM, but 2 of its key animator directors, William Hanna and Joseph Barbera, immediately started their own company, and soon had fantastic success. MGM closing down was actually a blessing in disguise for Hanna-Barbera, and the best thing to ever happen to them. This led to the first ever Hanna-Barbera production, The Rough and Ready Show. It ran for 3 seasons, and although it was a success, it wouldn't be a major success like Hanna-Barbera would soon have after this. Odd enough, this show has rarely been released on home media. The characters of Rough and Ready have become obscure compared to Hanna-Barbera's top stars like Yogi Bear, the Flintstones, and Scooby-Doo. That's a shame, because this is a good cartoon. Ruff is a smart little cat, and his best friend is Reddy, a not-too-bright dog. Tom Terrific makes its TV debut as a segment of Captain Kangaroo. Although this was made by the Terrytoon Studio, the animation was of significantly lower quality than their earlier successes of Mighty Mouse and Heckle and Jekyll. Tom Terrific was cheap. Dirt cheap. The cartoon has its fans, but make no mistake, this is not like real Terrytoons. Each episode was split into 5 parts, shown Monday through Friday. There were 26 episodes in all. Captain Kangaroo continued to rerun the cartoons for many years. Tom Terrific, despite his cult popularity, has never been given an official home video release. Colonel Bleep makes history as the first TV cartoon made in color. It's amazing that this cartoon is still known today by so many people, because it's quite unusual and very rare. 100 of these cartoons were made, each one ranging 3 to 6 minutes in length. They were made by a small animation studio in Miami, Florida called Soundac. As of 2023, only 44 of these cartoons are known to exist in any form. 8 of these are only available in monochrome. What happened to Colonel Bleep? The Soundak studio closed down in the early 1970s. When moving the company's materials to a van, car thieves stole it. The contents of the van have never turned up. Part of what was stolen was Colonel Bleep's master copies. Colonel Bleep is known to have last aired on television in 1971. The copyrights of the show's episodes lapsed without being renewed in 1985. Anything that still exists of the show wasn't preserved the best, so video quality varies. The cartoon ran on TV in syndication, originally as a segment of the show Uncle Bill's TV Club. What's this cartoon all about? It's a bit out there. Colonel Bleep is a friendly alien who comes to Earth after the first nuclear explosion in 1945 scares his home planet. He has a triangle head, skinny body, and often wears a transparent bubble helmet with a helicopter propeller and 2 antennae. He makes friends with a caveman named Scratch, who was transported from the past to the present by the nuclear bomb. Can nuclear bombs do that? If that wasn't goofy enough, the pair team up with a cowboy hat wearing puppet named Squeak, who, ironically, is still a cartoon. The trio establish an island base and protect the Earth from alien threats. This cartoon is a different kind of deal, but it had its fans back then and even now. From the Soviet Union came The Snow Queen, an animated musical fantasy film. It was based on the fairy tale by the Danish author Hans Christian Andersen. This cartoon movie has been seen all over the world in many languages and is common to find on home media. It's that well liked. When it was first released in America in 1959, it featured the voices of Sandra Dee and Tommy Kirk. The release of this film in the US was seen as a revolutionary moment in the Cold War. It was the first time tensions between the two countries were relaxed since World War II ended. Since then, the voices and soundtrack to the film have been changed numerous times. By the way, this is surprisingly good animation coming from the Soviet Union. The quality of the animation itself rivals what Disney and MGM had been doing. Stay tuned after the main feature to find out about the popular songs, movies, and television of 1957. And now, I got it bad, bad, bad. I'm hot for feature.
President Eisenhower began his second term as leader not only of America but all free peoples. His inauguration address was a peace plea.
May the turbulence of our age yield to the true time of peace, when men and nations shall share a life that honors the dignity of each. The brotherhood.
A hope devoutly echoed by all. But in England, another leader vanished from the scene. Anthony Eden, following the Suez invasion debacle, was replaced as Prime Minister by Harold Macmillan, into whose hands were placed Britain's financial problems and shrinking colonial empire. Overseas in Germany, the Republic, by an overwhelming vote of confidence, returned 81-year-old Chancellor Adenauer and his government to office. A new nation was born in Africa, with Vice President and Mrs. Nixon attending. Amid jubilant scenes, the former British colony of the Gold Coast became the Republic of Ghana, with Patriot Nkrumah as its first president. The move towards self-rule in Africa had been established. It was royalty year when Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip were welcomed at the White House by the First Lady at the beginning of a memorable visit to the nation. At the Queen's request, a trip across famous New York Harbor was the prelude to her visit to the big city, where an especially gaudy ticker-tape parade awaited her. Blasé New York really rolled out the carpet for the young monarch, and with youthful delight, she enjoyed every minute of it. In fabled Monaco, crowds celebrated a royal event of their own, a blessed event, the christening of Princess Caroline, first child of Prince Rainier and former movie star Grace Kelly. And now, with another royal arrival expected in March, they root for a boy. A 15-year reign of terror ended in New York when George Metesky was captured and admitted bombing 21 public places with a deranged motif, revenge. Also ended was the spy career of Colonel Abel, arrested after 9 years as master Russian agent. Operating a stone's throw from the federal building, he met his fate there in the form of a long prison term. Britain's elder statesman, Sir Winston Churchill, is once again in the news as Japan's special envoy asks his support in Japan's plea for the cancellation of proposed hydrogen bomb tests. Dr. Matsushita poses with Sir Winston and Japanese Ambassador Nishi after a talk in which Churchill stressed his full agreement with British policy, which is to minimize all conventional arms in favor of full nuclear weapons development. Ireland's unofficial ambassador, Robert Briscoe, Jewish Lord Mayor of Dublin, and Mrs. Briscoe are Ike's guests for an informal half-hour. Mayor Briscoe thanks Ike for the reception he's received in America and receives a gift of fine Irish cut glass. Green, of course. The liner America entering New York Harbor bears a happy couple. Harold Conley, Olympic champion hammer thrower, and his bride, the Czech women's discus thrower, the former Olga Fikitova. It was only after weeks of pleading with Czech Red authorities that Harold was permitted to bring his bride to the United States. They've only 35 cents between them, but in the land of freedom, the future looks limitless and rosy.
The glamour and excitement of New York society is enhanced by a fabulous lady from India. The Begum Aga Khan arrives at the Waldorf Astoria to preside over the festive Imperial Ball, a swank charity benefit for the hospitalized veterans of the Musicians Emergency Fund. Wearing $1 million worth of diamonds, the guest of honor reigns over a glittering court that is one of the big events of the big town's winter social swirl. Big gainers will be our boys in hospitals, for whom the therapy of music is a wonderful gift on the road back to healthy lives. A spanking new 57 limousine is the grand prize of the affair, and the winning ticket is picked by the guest of honor. The lucky winner will ride in style. Meanwhile, dancing is stylish at the Imperial Ball, and most stylish of all is the Begum Aga Khan, here dancing with the dashing Prince Obolensky.
Hello, I'm Marlon Brando. Throughout our history, men have been drawn to our causes by a common love of freedom. They've fought beside us and given us aid and comfort and the assurance that we were not alone. Now, these men came from all over the world. They came from Germany, France, Poland, and Hungary. And their names will always be remembered with affection and gratitude. At this time, the Hungarian people are fighting for that same sweet freedom. And we cannot send men to fight beside them, but we can send comfort and aid in the form of money and supplies. So give to the International Rescue Committee. Give more than you can afford, to the end that the Hungarian people may be reassured that they also are not alone. Your gift will be a payment on our debt. Send your contribution to Help Hungary, Box 2, Times Square Station, New York, New York.
It's the biggest night of the year in Hollywood as Oscar steps into the spotlight for the 29th time. And at the Pantages Theater, just about everybody who's anybody in the film world is on hand for the annual Academy Awards presentation ceremony. Among them, Robert Stack, nominated as Best Supporting Actor for his role in Written on the Wind. A special ovation greets Janet Gaynor, who in 1929 was the first to receive the award as Best Actress. Anthony Quinn this year won his second Oscar for his role in Lust for Life. Popular youngster Tim Hovey was among the onlookers, as was starlet Vicki Dugan, who earlier made an impression with her part in The Great Man, and made quite an impression tonight. The theater is jammed with a dazzling array of personalities as the Oscars, Hollywood's highest honor, are presented. Jack Lemmon presents the award to Best Supporting Actress Dorothy Malone for her appearance in UI's Written on the Wind, which was nominated in 3 categories. You'll Yul Brynner receives the accolade of Best Actor of the Year from Anna Magnani for The King and I. Ernest Borgnine bestows the award for the Best Actress of the Year, won by Ingrid Bergman, accepted on her behalf by Cary Grant. For the Best Picture, Around the World in 80 Days, producer Mike Todd receives his Oscar from Janet Gaynor. Another thrilling Academy Award evening in which Hollywood honors its own. At the Korean Embassy in Washington, a distinguished roster of guests from the Diplomatic Corps and Capital Society attends a reception honoring Mr. and Mrs. Rock Hudson. The popular film star is being honored for his portrayal of Colonel Dean Hess in UI's widely acclaimed new production, Battle Hymn, the film story of the preacher-turned-fighter pilot who fought in 2 wars, organized the Korean Air Force, and who saved thousands of war orphans from abandonment and from red capture. An unusual tribute in the nation's capital for an outstanding film achievement.
It may be cold where you are, but it's balmy in Bermuda, where the first of 1957 beach styles are revealed. There's a French flavor to the fashions from the collection of the French designer de Givenchy. The pants are separate from the tubular sheath. That's one distinctive feature of the new swimsuits, giving the wearer plenty of latitude to cover the longitude. Some stylish novelties decorate the Bermuda background. The long-legged suit looks like a throwback to old times, but the modern mosaic print makes it new and exciting, and the pants' legs can be pushed up to normal length. Exotic fabrics plus a French flair in styling combine for a welcome hello to summer.
Anything can happen in the spring. It's a season when the ladies buy hats and baseball players go out and play double headers. Now you can have both. A double header hat is like saying, batter up, so to speak, for a collection of crazy hats for crazy cats. The silly season for bonnets is really topped by this show in Vancouver, British Columbia. The biggest hat in the world, for instance. Must be rugged to wear it, but the gals from the Chinese Y in Vancouver get a kick out of the corny concoctions. Some of the barnyard bonnets create quite a flap in millinery circles. A Mad Hatter must have dreamed up this millinery merry-go-round madcap for an Alice in Wonderland. She's in the social whirl. Chicken with cigarette wraps it up. Very chic. Cute chick, too. The Lido in Paris is aflame with celebrities on the Champs-Élysées for the opening of a new and zesty show. Everybody who is anybody is there. The Duke of Windsor heads the notables, which include Michelle Morgan and the famous mustache of Salvador Dali and veteran Maurice Chevalier. The show itself scores an instant hit for the festive season, as well as the dancing which follows. Author Francois Sagan sets the pace for an occasion that is truly Parisian, truly festive, and in every sense, a success. The Great Man, new Universal film, draws top personalities of the press and show business. Adria Coe and UI President Milton Rackmill. Opera star Robert Merrill and Mrs. Merrill. Sammy Davis Jr., one of the many Broadway notables on hand, including Billy Goldberg, Stubby Kaye, and Robert Alda. Model Vicki Dugan helps out in the gag shot with Al Morgan, author of the best-selling novel of show business, on which the movie starring Jose Ferrer was based. An early contender for 1957 Screen Honors. Marietta, Ohio stages the greatest civic celebration in its history to welcome Colonel Dean Hess and to celebrate the world premiere of his dramatic film biography, UI's Battle Hymn. Guests of honor include Dan Duryea and Rock Hudson, who portrays Colonel Hess, the parson who became an ace airman and who saved thousands of Korean orphans from capture by the Rebs. Marietta College, celebrating Founders Day, confers an honorary degree on Rock Hudson, and the entire city joins in acclaiming everyone connected with the premiere. 2 days of all-out festivities with never a letdown. The Air Force joins in, just as it cooperated in filming Battle Hymn. The biggest crowd ever gathers outside the Colony Theater to cheer the premiere of one of the truly great human documents ever to emerge from any war. In New York, a collection of Oriental originals is unveiled by Max Hess, who pioneered the importing of high styles from Japan. This sportswear outfit is patterned after suits of armor worn by samurai warriors. Here's a new look from a new fashion capital, Tokyo. Fresh and original styling in silks and brocades with the fine artistry of Oriental tailoring. The lining of this coat accents the reverse striping of the sheath dress worn beneath. The hakama, traditional short pants for men, sets the style for this sportswear ensemble for women with hooded blouse of red silk. American fashion experts are intrigued too by an evening gown inspired by Japanese folklore. Silver disc medallions form an eye-catching motif. A wedding gown is enhanced by a shoulder stole inspired by a Buddhist temple surplice. Dame Fashion looks east. In his State of the Union message, President Eisenhower warns that defense of the free world depends on America.
The existence of a strongly armed imperialistic dictatorship poses a continuing threat to the free world's, and thus to our own nation's, security and peace. There are certain truths to be remembered here. First, America, alone and isolated, cannot assure even its own security. We must be joined by the capability and resolution of nations that have proved themselves dependable defenders of freedom. Isolation from them invites war. Our security is also enhanced by the immeasurable interest that joins us with all peoples who believe that peace with justice must be preserved, that wars of aggression are crimes against humanity. Another truth is that our survival in today's world requires modern, adequate, dependable military strength. Our nation has made great strides in assuring a modern defense, so armed in new weapons, so deployed, so equipped, that today our security force is the most powerful in our peacetime history. It can punish heavily any enemy who undertakes to attack us. It is a major deterrent to war.
Worried world attention focuses on the royal palace at Amman, Jordan, where King Hussein, confronted by a succession of cabinets, struggles to keep his nation intact. With pro-Western Prime Minister Khalidi forced out by red pressure, Hussein seeks a political solution. Failing, he falls back on loyal members of the Arab Legion and declares martial law. Even as Jordan is rent by red and Egyptian-inspired riots, the 22-year-old monarch receives loyal Bedouin sheikhs who pledge their allegiance to his policy. He blames a former premier with seeking Western aid while aligning himself with the Reds. With the first test of the Eisenhower Middle East Doctrine, the president proclaims Jordan's independence to be vital. Implementing the doctrine, heavy elements of the Sixth Fleet are ordered to sea under sealed orders in a show of force.
Politics have always had their smoke-filled rooms, but this is the French version, and Pierre Mendès France gets a warm reception as he presides over a rally of the radical socialists. One speech precipitates a barrage of tear bombs, which starts a series of fires in the Palais des Sports. In minutes, the place is an uproar as 5,000 milling people join the sport. French politics, ooh la la.
In a special address to the Middle East on the Voice of America's 15th anniversary, the president restates his proposed policy for that area.
I believe that the well-being of the peoples of the Middle East requires the nations of that region to build up and strengthen their economies and their institutions. Now we must face the fact that while we are trying to help build a world of freedom and justice among sovereign people, the masters of international communism are working constantly to tear down that kind of world. Communism, according to all its own leaders, must be a system of international control and conformity. Thus, at its very heart, it is the complete opposite and enemy of any kind of nationalism. Its avowed program is to destroy totally the religions, governments, institutions, and traditions of the Christian world, the Buddhist world, the Islamic world, the Judaic world, and the world of every religion and culture. The communist rulers then propose to substitute a whole new system of thought and control
dictated from Communist Party headquarters. They think that a few theorists and rulers know what is best for everyone, and they are determined to drive everyone toward that kind of world.
President Eisenhower, vacationing at the Georgia plantation of Secretary of the Treasury Humphreys, hears of the deteriorating Middle East situation from Secretary of State Dulles and other top advisors. The gravity of the Israeli-Egyptian impasse causes him to cut short his winter holiday and return to Washington. At the heart of the problem still lies the Suez Canal. Here, a small Italian tanker attempts to run the gauntlet of still unremoved obstacles, but is turned back on the pretext of a sunken vessel loaded with explosives, a part of the war of nerves over the canal, which is within days of complete clearance. Finally, as arguments rage in the United Nations, a small Egyptian ship threads its way through the entire length of the canal. But the impasse remains. In the shadow of the Eiffel Tower and Sputnik, President Eisenhower, French Prime Minister Gaillard, and other NATO leaders gathered in Paris to consider the peril. Their decision? That 3 European nations would be armed with intermediate-range missiles. The magic of President Eisenhower was a rallying force to an undecided conference. And to give added impetus to its purpose, word was received of the successful launching of the Atlas intercontinental missile, an answer in part at least to Russia's space supremacy. In the rocket's fiery wake was America's sober realization that the battle had just been joined and that the work of self-preservation was at hand, the dawn of the space age. Althea Gibson of New York became the first of her race to win the title at Wimbledon, England, and she won the U.S. Nationals, too. Sportsmen everywhere applauded Althea's triumph and shared in her moment of glory when Queen Elizabeth herself presented the symbol of victory to the girl from Harlem, who became the toast of the tennis world in 1957. In Paris, the world's bantamweight champion Alphonse Halamy of France made short work of Chick Brogan of Scotland. Brogan took a 9 count in round 2 and tried to go on. But Halamy was out for a quick finish, and Brogan didn't last long. This time, it was all over. Baseball added its share of drama and excitement, plus a red-hot batting race between the switcher, Mickey Mantle of the Yankees, and the slugger, Ted Williams of the Boston Red Sox. Ted won with a phenomenal batting average, and home runs helped. The slugger had another great year. The World Series between the Yankees and the Braves was the story of Lou Burdett, who pitched 3 victories. His third wrapped it up for the Braves and made Milwaukee not only famous, but delirious. The man of the hour was Lou Burdett, and the Braves were the new world's champions of baseball. Hail the champs! Oklahoma again ruled the college football scene, but the Sooners didn't go undefeated. In the year's outstanding gridiron upset, the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame scored the only touchdown of a hard and closely fought game to end the longest winning streak in football. The Heisman Award went to Texas A&M's All-America halfback, Johnny Crow. A pro career looms in '58 for the #1 college star of '57. Football had its upsets and its heroes, and also the unexpected, like this play in Canada's Grey Cup Classic. The Winnipeg pass was intercepted by a Hamilton player. Touchdown for sure. Oops! A fan tripped him. What a rhubarb. Basketball takes the center of the sports spotlight. The Invitational Holiday Festival at Madison Square Garden pits some of the country's crack teams. St. John's in white faces Brigham Young in blue. 2 fast-paced, closely matched quintets. Action aplenty. Oops, wrong kind of action, but no harm done and the play goes on. With the team separated by 1 point at halftime, the Utah 5, the Cougars, turn on the heat. High-scoring Tom Stanky scores 2 of his 30 points for the Cougars. But St. John's Red Men are never out of contention, dangerous till the final bell. It makes for a good game all the way. Here's some neat play under the basket. With a comfortable lead, the Cougars drive the last nail to secure the game, 89-75. Kezar Stadium is jammed with 60,000 fans to see one of pro football's top thrills of the year. The San Francisco 49ers, with Y.A. Tittle passing, get the jump on the Detroit Lions. Owens snags it for the touchdown. And the 49ers look like a surefire bet to clinch the Western title of the National League. Second quarter, Y.A. Tittle clicks again. His pass to Wilson puts the ball on the Detroit 7. And then Tittle's magic arm uncorks another bullseye. Pitching into the end zone to Wilson. And San Francisco has a 20-7 halftime lead. As the second half opens, the 49ers look as though they'll run the Lions right out of Kezar Stadium. Hugh McElhenney breaks away and goes careening through the Detroit team. "70 yards before he's forced out of bounds. The 49ers settle for a field goal, and they lead Detroit 27-7. Seems like a comfortable margin. But suddenly the Lions start to roar and claw back. Tobin Rote connects with Junker for 11. And seconds later, he fires to Cassidy for 14. Tom Tracy worms his way through center for a touchdown. As soon as the Lions get the ball again, Tracy bursts up the middle and then ducks and dodges tacklers all the way. 59 yards to pay dirt. And now the 49ers lead is down to 6 points. The Lions are really roaring now. Rote hits Junker with a pass, and he barrels along to the San Francisco 15. The fourth quarter opens with Tracy wheeling around right into the 5. And then Gedman scores to give Detroit the victory. Records in track and field were set in the NCAAs at Austin, Texas. A new collegiate mark in the broad jump, 26 feet 7 inches for George Bell of Indiana. A world record fell in the 880 when Don Bowden of California headed for the tape, well ahead of the favored Ron Delaney of Villanova. .147 2/10 seconds for the new champ. And still another world's mark set by Bob Gutowski of Occidental College in the pole vault. Higher and higher. Hardware hats on parade. For 41 years, employees of a San Francisco hardware store have been blossoming forth in the spring with bizarre bonnets made from products they sell in the store. Strictly from stock, strictly for laughs. Mops, work gloves, brushes. What a potpourri of merry millinery. The drinks are on me could be the name of these silly chapeaux, ideal for the cocktail hour. Quite chic, so down the hatch. You name it and you can wear it. Strictly for the birds, but not cheap. A good salesman could mop up selling them. Two juniors at the College of the Pacific seesaw their way to a new world's record. Okay, fellas, why? As Steve Henry and Mike Resso explain it, they're out to beat a mark of 100 hours established on the campus here 6 years ago. It's spring, and besides, teeter-tottering is better than swallowing goldfish. The latter was all down. This has both ups and downs. Meals are on schedule. There's even time for a bit of study. But the bystanders don't insist on it. They prefer to watch the boys eating or sleeping as a new record is made. Yes, they made it, but it was a close shave. A dirt track outside Paris serves as a proving ground for a melange of mad motorized madcaps. What it proves is beyond me, but what a wonderful time they're having. No lights, no cops, just carte blanche to do everything you and I have always wanted to do in a Sunday traffic jam. How often have you had to thread a needle to get home before midnight? If you think you're good at it, regardez these Frenchies. Ooh la la. Somebody in your way? Hit 'em. Push him out of the way. That's the ticket. Only here, you'd never get one. Ticket, I mean. Introducing that freewheeling whiz of the hamburger circus, Max the Chimp. The hitchhiker is Brother Moritz. Between them, the two troopers of the Shax family roll 'em in the aisles in their Berlin debut. Roll 'em is right, and this time it's a rock and roll 'em. Look at that Max, will you? One hand yet. I'm the champ, says Max the chimp. Says Moritz, nah, you're just a chump. Come with us to the Culinary Art Show in Chicago for a look at what the guys in the tall starched hats cook up when there's an occasion in the offing. Everything you see is edible, except, of course, the furniture and people. But beyond that, don't let appearances deceive you. See what we mean? Now, these comic tipplers are really lobsters, a confusing but kind of amusing theme and variations sponsored by the Cooks and Pastry Cooks Union to show their skill. You may not know what each decoration conceals, but you can bet it's delicious. Oh, just one little taste.
A few other big events of 1957. There were many celebrity deaths this year. Here are just some of them. Humphrey Bogart, the Hollywood screen legend. Gene Lockhart, accomplished actor and the father of actress June Lockhart. Famous Western bad guy actor Charles King. James Whale, director of Frankenstein and The Invisible Man, died by drowning. For almost 30 years, his death was ruled as accidental. His gay lover, film producer David Lewis, withheld Whale's suicide note until shortly before his own death in 1987. Judy Tyler, actress, died from a car accident along with her husband. She was just getting started in movies in 1957 and only made 2. Her second film was the Elvis movie Jailhouse Rock, where she played the female lead. It was shortly after filming that she had her accident. Elvis was so devastated that he refused to watch the finished film. Oliver Hardy of Laurel and Hardy. A lot of people took this hard, including Stan Laurel. Louis B. Mayer, film producer and head of MGM. Under his management, MGM was the most prestigious studio in the whole film industry. When he left in 1951, MGM slowly but surely lost a lot of its steam. Now only the name exists, and that gets passed around like a plate full of finger sandwiches. Fred F. Sears, director of many enjoyable B-movies. He had a way of stretching budgets like no one else while still making watchable films. He even cast himself in various parts to save money and usually went uncredited. Norma Talmadge, successful silent film actress. When she retired in 1930, she really retired and didn't even give autographs. Charles Path, French film producer and businessman, founder of the Path Company. Not only did he make movies, he even sold camera equipment. Jimmy Dorsey, musician, died from lung cancer less than 2 months after his last hit, So Rare. No more deaths! On to something else. Jack Paar became the permanent host for The Tonight Show. He quit the show in 1962 and was replaced by Johnny Carson, whose legendary reign lasted 30 years. What was the most popular car in 1957? A lot of people would think the 1957 Chevy was that year's most iconic car. However, Ford outsold Chevy that year for the first time since 1935. Ford struck gold with the 1957 Ford Skyline. Its most popular feature was a high-tech, hardtop convertible roof that opened and arced back into a rear-hinged trunk in just a matter of seconds. What hurt Chevy's sales numbers this year? After all, the 1957 Chevy has always been and will always be a popular model of car for car buffs. It's more prized by collectors than the 57 Ford. Well, the 57 Chevy was the first car to be sold with tubeless tires. At the time, a lot of people didn't trust them. That, and Ford's body design was all new. Chevy was basically living off the enormous success of their 55 model. The Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1 in orbit, the first artificial satellite to orbit the Earth. A month later, they launched Sputnik 2 with the first animal, a dog, to be in orbit. The space race that the US government denied was going on was, in fact, making the government nervous. A month after Sputnik 2, the US tried to launch a satellite and failed miserably when the Vanguard rocket blew up on the launch pad. Whoopsie daisy! The legendary Boeing 707 jet airliner flew for the first time, often credited with starting the jet age. These were made until 1979 and, as of 2023, are still used to a limited degree in military and charter service. Very late in the year, rock singer Jerry Lee Lewis secretly wed his second cousin Myra Gale Brown. She was also 13 to his 22. When this came out in the middle of the next year, it was quite a scandal and hurt Jerry Lee's career. Although he later found success in country music, he lost that momentum from the 1950s. This was something that people never stopped making fun of. Popular tunes of 1957. This was a good year for music, and Elvis Presley dominated the charts. His two biggest hits were Jailhouse Rock, the biggest song of the year, and All Shook Up. He also had great hits with Too Much, Teddy Bear, Loving You, and Treat Me Nice. His album, the Elvis Christmas album, was a major success. The output of music in 1957 was incredible. Rock and roll was in full force. Country was also doing well, but not like rock and roll. Other pop music that had ruled the roost earlier in the decade wasn't quite as prominent anymore. Blues music had been around for a long time, but sadly didn't get the attention it deserved. It was a landmark year for the blues, however. B.B. King, after years of recording singles, finally released his first album, Singin' the Blues. He became the driving force of making blues mainstream, earning the nickname King of the Blues. Rock and roll's other giants. Little Richard came out with Lucille, Jenny Jenny, and Keep a Knockin'. He also had his first album, Here is Little Richard. Ricky Nelson made the successful transition from TV star to rock star with a bunch of big songs including A Teenager's Romance, I'm Walkin', You're My One and Only Love, Have I Told You Lately That I Love You, Bebop Baby, Stood Up, and Waitin' in School. He also came out with his first album, Ricky. Chuck Berry continued to score with rock and roll music in School Day. He released his very first album called After School Session. People who didn't want to admit they liked Elvis would still admit to liking Buddy Holly, like he was more sophisticated or something. That still continues to this day. Buddy had a big year. He came out with his first album with the Crickets called The Chirping Crickets. He also had big songs with That'll Be the Day, Peggy Sue, Every Day, Oh Boy, and Not Fade Away. Just about everybody liked Fats Domino. He released a lot of music in 1957 and had two big hits with I'm Walkin', soon to be covered by Ricky Nelson, and Valley of Tears. The McGuire sisters released 8 singles this year, but the only one that was at all successful was the #1 hit Sugar Time. It referenced Jimmie Rogers' song Honeycomb from earlier in the year. Jerry Lee Lewis had 2 big monster hits this year, Great Balls of Fire and Whole Lotta Shakin' Going On. The Coasters had 2 huge hits with Searchin' and Youngblood. The Everly Brothers rode high this year with their self-titled debut album and 2 big hits, Bye Bye Love and Wake Up Little Susie. Sam Cooke hit the ground running with his first single, You Send Me, a #1 hit, and 2 more big songs, I'll Come Running Back to You and I Love You for Sentimental Reasons. Eddie Cochran had a good year. After 2 years of zip with success, he finally made it big with his first and only album, Singin' to My Baby, and 2 successful singles, Sittin' in the Balcony and Drive-In Show. One of his singles that was not a success at the time later became a classic in its own right, 20 Flight Rock. He played the song in the previous year's film, The Girl Can't Help It, and re-recorded it for this year's single. It did nothing at the time, but many people have done cover versions since. Eddie Cochran's success would really peak by the next year and establish him as a rock legend. 1957 was an odd sort of year for the Platters. Every single they released this year charted, and they did well enough to be considered hits, but they weren't anywhere near as successful as what they had been putting out the previous 2 years, or what they did the next year. These nearly forgotten little gems include I'm Sorry, He's Mine, and My Dream as the biggest, with Only Because and Helpless still charting. Make no mistake, the next year made them a record-selling colossus, but 1957 was very modest. The Diamonds were a very big rock and roll group, that's a fact. But over time, a lot of people think they were just a mildly successful group with a few hits. On the contrary, this Canadian quartet had other hits before this year, and did chart some more popular records over the next 4 years. Little Darlin' became their biggest hit ever, with The Stroll, Silhouettes, Words of Love, written by Buddy Holly, and Zip Zip among their other successes. They even came out with their first 2 albums this year. Jackie Wilson had just left the group The Dominoes. He had his first hit song as a solo artist with Reet Petite. What? You haven't heard of it? That's probably because it was a big smash hit just about everywhere else but America. It charted in the US, but only at number 62 on Billboard. The next year would be much better for Jackie, but his greatest successes would come a decade later. Billy Ward and his Dominoes also had 2 big hits this year with Stardust and Deep Purple. More big rock and roll songs. Danny and the Juniors had one of the biggest songs of the year with At the Hop. Paul Anka had his first big hit, Diana, also one of the year's biggest songs. Buddy Knox had his first and biggest hit, Party Doll, this year, and 2 more, Rock Your Little Baby to Sleep and Hula Love. Bill Justice released the first rock and roll instrumental track, Raunchy, and it was a success, immediately spawning 2 cover versions that also charted. This is a cool tune for any era. The song Young Love was so popular that it was recorded and made successful by 3 different artists this year. First, by country singer Sonny James. Second, by actor and pop singer Tab Hunter. Last but not least, by vocal group The Crew Cuts. All of these were number 1 hits. The song continues to be covered by other people. Another song like that would be Tammy, written for the film Tammy and the Bachelor. Debbie Reynolds had a hit with it, as did the Ames brothers. Several cover versions were also released that year. Polly Bergen even sang it on her own short-lived variety show. Tommy Sands did Teenage Crush. The Hollywood Flames did Buzz Buzz Buzz. Guy Mitchell's biggest hit this year was Rockabilly. Joe Bennett and the Sparkletones' first single, Black Slacks, was also their only real hit. Sal Mineo did Start Movin' in My Direction. The Del Vikings released an incredible 9 singles this year, with only 3 of them being hits. The first of their hits was their biggest song ever, Come Go With Me. This became so popular that people forget they also did Whispering Bells and Cool Shake in the same year. The Toonweavers came out with their classic Happy Happy Birthday Baby. Jimmy Rogers came out with his self-titled debut album this year and had 2 big hits, Honeycomb and Kisses Sweeter Than Wine. Margie Rayburn is a grossly overlooked and underappreciated singer. She had one really big single with I'm Available. Nothing she did before or after was even close to successful. Fun little fact, the B-side to the single, called If You Were, was a wacky little song written by Ross Bagdasarian. Ross who's a what's it? He would become better known as David Seville, and the next year had a monster big hit with Witch Doctor. Later that same year, he developed the Alvin and the Chipmunks characters for the Chipmunk song and ended up becoming a phenomenon. Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers did have a few hits this year, Goody Goody and Out in the Cold Again. The Bobettes released their first single and only real hit with Mr. Lee. The song was an upbeat little number about the girls' crush on their teacher. In real life, the girls hated the real Mr. Lee, and the lyrics reflected that. The Atlantic record label insisted they revise the lyrics before they recorded it, and they did. The song sold 2 million copies, but the Bobettes were always pretty upset with Atlantic for making them change the song. 2 years later, they did a version of the song like they wanted, called I Shot Mr. Lee, for another label. It did only so-so in record sales, led to a major lawsuit for copyright infringement, and Atlantic won. That was pretty much the end of the Bobettes' success, although they tried until 1974. The Four Coins hit it big with Shangri-La and My One Sin. Other pop singers with hit records: Pat Boone, Nat King Cole, Perry Como, The Four Lads, Johnny Mathis, The Mills Brothers, Johnny Ray, Della Reese, Don Rondo, Frank Sinatra, Kay Starr, Gail Storm, and Andy Williams. The country music of 1957. Country music also had a good showing this year. Patsy Cline came out with her self-titled debut album and her first hit single, Walkin' After Midnight. Bobby Helms had 3 big hits this year, with the biggest being Jingle Bell Rock. He also had Fraulein and My Special Angel. Johnny Duncan was an American bluegrass musician who had his greatest success in England with the song Last Train to San Fernando. He also had 2 more hit songs over there that year. For some reason, England just got him. Frankie Lane also had a good and very busy year. Jim Reeves did really well, with his 2 biggest hits being Four Walls and Am I Losing You? Here are some more big country stars with #1 hits this year: Johnny Cash, Ferlin Husky, Webb Pierce, Ray Price, and Marty Robbins. Johnny Cash also came out with his successful first album, Johnny Cash with His Hot and Blue Guitar. The people mentioned in this section aren't the only ones who had successful country records by a long shot, but they were certainly key country artists in 1957. Also, a number of rock records also charted as country records due to the fact that there was so much country influence in early rock and roll. Elvis, Sonny James, the Everlys, and Bobby Helms were all considered crossover artists. TV debuts of 1957. 1957 was a good year for television. Hollywood took over from New York City as the dominant location for primetime TV programs. Up until this time, many TV shows were still live. Now more of them were being filmed. Hollywood became the king of movies and television. Eat rocks, New York! Action shows. Zorro. Disney's Zorro series was very well liked and became a pop culture classic, despite the fact it ran only 2 seasons. 4 additional specials were made through 1961. Guy Williams became as identified with the Zorro character as Tyrone Power had so many years earlier. and Henry Calvin as Sergeant Garcia is hilarious. Children's shows. Cinderella. This live TV special isn't remembered as well as it should be. This is the only Rodgers and Hammerstein musical written for television. It starred a 21-year-old Julie Andrews as Cinderella, long before Mary Poppins fame. It was seen by more than 100 million people. There have been 2 TV remakes, one in 1965 and one in 1997. It was originally broadcast in color, but only a black and white kinescope of the earlier dress rehearsal, not the actual live broadcast, exists. This was a major ratings hit at the time, but due to technological limitations, the real broadcast, as people saw it back then, is lost television. The Pied Piper of Hamelin. This musical family film is the first made-for-television film. Van Johnson played the Pied Piper. He was already a successful actor, but became identified with this role. It was a big hit on TV. Comedy shows. Leave It to Beaver. The most 50s of all the 50 shows didn't come out until late in the decade. It ran for 6 seasons, 3 in the 50s and 3 in the 60s. It's just as much a 60s show as it is a 50s show, but everyone thinks of this as a 1950s show. It was a unique sitcom, but still innocent and fun. The children characters were the leads, with the adults more like supporting cast. Ward and June Cleaver were very important to the show, but the stories really centered around Wally and the Beav and all their friends and enemies. This show inspired countless imitations for decades, but few have matched this in success. The Lucy Desi Comedy Hour. This was really just a retooling of the I Love Lucy show, made into 1-hour programs and shown infrequently as a series of 13 specials through 1960. Unlike I Love Lucy, these shows mostly focused on guest stars and had lengthy musical numbers. Desi had serious health problems and his marriage to Lucy was falling apart, so the Ricardo saga slowly came to a close. The Real McCoys. This is one of my all-time favorite TV shows. A poor farm family from West Virginia moves to a house they inherited in California. The head of the family is Grandpa Amos McCoy, played by Walter Brennan. His newly married grandson, Luke, is played by Richard Crenna. The family has a series of funny misadventures as they adjust to a better life in California. It ran for 6 seasons and seems to have inspired, at least in part, the Beverly Hillbillies. The biggest difference between those two shows is that the Clampett family moved to California from Tennessee as instant millionaires. The Real McCoys often focused on the family trying to make ends meet. Drama shows. Divorce Court. Hey, I'm surprised this show started in 1957 too. It was actually a local show in Los Angeles. Someone thought a court show about couples going through divorce was a good idea. In 1958, the show was syndicated nationally. At the time of this video, Divorce Court is in its 4th incarnation. The most recent version is the longest lasting, beginning in 1999. Perry Mason. Raymond Burr became the Perry Mason everyone knows. What a lot of people may not realize is that Perry Mason was a series of novels that began in 1933. It was so popular that the first Perry Mason film was made in 1934. 3 actors played Perry Mason on screen before Raymond Burr starred in this show. This classic TV series ran 9 seasons. A short-lived revival series ran for 1 season in 1973 to 1974. Then, in 1985, a long-running series of 30 Perry Mason films were made for television. Raymond Burr starred in 26 of them before he died in 1993. The remaining films had replacement characters filling in while Perry Mason was out of town. Music shows. American Bandstand. It actually began in 1952 as Bandstand, a local show in Philadelphia. This was long before rock and roll. In 1957, Dick Clark pitched the show as American Bandstand, focused on rock and roll, and it got picked up nationally. This became the show for current popular music, one that every musician wanted to be on. It ran for 30 years on ABC, one more in syndication, and one more on the USA Network. Since this run, there have been 2 specials in 1992 and 2002. The Edsel Show. This was actually the first of many Bing Crosby specials. It made history as the first full-length show to be recorded on videotape. It was a major TV success, but the ratings didn't help the sales of its sponsor, the 1958 Ford Edsel. Also on this show were Frank Sinatra, Rosemary Clooney, Louis Armstrong, Bob Hope, Bing's son Lindsay, and the 4 Preps. The Guy Mitchell Show. Just another one-season music show. The Jimmy Dean Show. The famous country singer had his first short-lived daytime show in 1957. His later series would be more successful. The Pat Boone Chevy Showroom. This ran for 3 seasons on ABC. The Polly Bergen Show. Polly Bergen was an extremely popular singer, actress, and TV personality. However, her weekly variety show on NBC lasted just 1 season of 18 episodes. Something went wrong, especially since this was the era of variety shows. Westerns. Have Gun, Will Travel. This popular series ran for 6 seasons and starred Richard Boone as a man in black called Paladin, a mercenary who solved terrible problems. Maverick. James Garner's career breakout. This was a western with comedy overtones, although not a straight-out wacky comedy. Garner's character of Brent Maverick was a poker-playing gambler who had a series of misadventures. The show ran for 5 seasons. Wagon Train! This popular long-running series ran for 8 seasons and starred Ward Bond as the wagon master and Robert Horton as the scout for a westbound wagon train going from Missouri to California. They met different people along the way and faced various challenges. As a matter of fact, it influenced the creation of Star Trek in 1966, pitched as Wagon Train to the Stars. Other notable TV debuts. The Royal Christmas Message from England's royal family was first televised this year. It had been an annual tradition since 1932 on radio. Queen Elizabeth II delivered this message. It continues to be done every year. Ed Asner made his TV debut in an episode of Studio One. He went on to have a fantastic career in TV and movies, but really hit his stride as Lou Grant in the comedy series The Mary Tyler Moore Show. He even got his own successful spin-off series, Lou Grant, that was a drama show. Peter Falk, long before he became Columbo, made his TV debut in an episode of Robert Montgomery Presents. One thing you'll notice, no matter how far back you go, is that Peter Falk was always a good actor. Last but not least, the movies of 1957. There were many, many movies released in 1957. This is an overview of the movies that were the most popular and those that are otherwise noteworthy. Elvis movies. Elvis movies are very distinctive. There's nothing else like them. Critics have always been pretty dismissive of Elvis Presley's movies, but they are still the most watched movies of the 1950s and 60s. These movies weren't trying to impress you with Elvis's acting. They were just fun, colorful movies with a few songs here and there. It was a style that caught on with fans. He made 2 movies this year, Loving You and Jailhouse Rock. The latter film became one of his most iconic movies, especially for the Jailhouse Rock musical number. Rock and roll movies. This is a weird little subgenre of movies. Legendary disc jockey Alan Freed was the pioneer of this kind of film. They weren't really musicals, but they couldn't afford to be Elvis movies. There would be a story, of sorts, but the movies would largely consist of musical performances from the big stars of the day. As times changed, this kind of movie evolved into the beach movie, then the hippie movies of the late 60s. Jamboree. Alan Freed and his DJ rival Dick Clark both appeared in this movie. This had a ton of famous rock stars in it, including, but not limited to, Fats Domino, Jerry Lee Lewis, Frankie Avalon, Carl Perkins, and Connie Francis. For some reason, country singer Slim Whitman was also in it. Jerry Lewis. The team of Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis split up in 1956, and it was an ugly split. Both of them went on to have extremely successful solo careers, more success than they ever had as a team, and they were already plenty popular. Jerry Lewis made 2 movies this year, The Delicate Delinquent and The Sad Sack. The latter film was based on the funny comic book series from Harvey and was a hit. Dean Martin's first film after the split was 10,000 Bedrooms. This movie did not do well, but it didn't stop Martin from becoming one of the biggest movie properties of the 1960s and 70s. The Three Stooges. This was a dark period for the Three Stooges. Curly was long gone. Shemp was gone. Joe Besser became the new third stooge. They made 8 shorts this year that are just so hard to watch. Joe Besser was good in other roles before and after the Stooges, but for some reason or another, he just wasn't a good fit for the Stooges, and the partnership lasted only a year and a half. All of the shorts the Stooges did with Joe Besser were filmed from 1956 to 1957, but they were released in theaters from 1957 to 1959. It wasn't just Joe Besser. The budgets for the shorts were cut to ribbons, often recycling old footage. They were even shorter than before. This was the end of the Three Stooges shorts, but they came back strong in 1959 with feature films and a new partner, Curly Joe Dorita. Other comedy movies. Ma and Pa Kettle on Old MacDonald's Farm. This was the last of the popular Ma and Pa Kettle movies and the only one to star another actor as Pa. The movie wasn't a great success at the time, but I don't know why. It was actually a good film, and I even liked Parker Finelli as Pa. He had good success in his acting career and became popular as the Pepperidge Farm guy in commercials from 1956 to 1977. Don't remember him? Pepperidge Farm remembers. Sorry, I had to do it. This was also Marjorie Maine's very last film. She acted for 1 more year on television, then retired. Designing Woman, a romantic comedy film with Gregory Peck and Lauren Bacall. Don't Go Near the Water, starring Glenn Ford. This movie helped establish Ford's reputation as a dependable comic actor. He had been previously known for extremely serious roles. Ford had done a comedy film the year before this called The Tea House of the August Moon that was very successful and led to him doing this movie, which was also a success. A King in New York. Charlie Chaplin was still making movies in 1957? It's true, but this movie didn't see American release until 1972. Why? Chaplin was exiled from America in 1952 due to considerable pressure from FBI head J. Edgar Hoover during the communist hunt known as the Red Scare or McCarthyism. Chaplin denied being a communist, but he definitely wasn't in agreement with the American government on a lot of things. A King in New York was certainly influenced by his personal experiences. He made this movie in England, premiered it in Paris, and did not allow it to be released in America. He didn't even allow American press to attend the premiere. Chaplin was that bitter about things. Cutting America off from seeing the film really hurt its revenue. It was only a modest success in Europe. The production values were crude compared to what he was doing in Hollywood, and a lot of people found the satire to be too bitter. The movie finally saw American release on March 8, 1972. The next month, on April 10th, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences offered Chaplin an honorary award. Initially, he was reluctant to accept, but he ultimately decided to come, and it was the first time he had been in the US for 20 years. It meant a lot to him that he hadn't been dismissed by the American public. A few months after that, J. Edgar Hoover died. 1972 was a good year for Charlie Chaplin. The Little Hut, a romantic comedy with Ava Gardner and David Niven. Operation Madball. Although this is a mostly forgotten military comedy, it's significant for two things. One, it's the first time Jack Lemmon received top billing in a movie. Two, it's the first major screen role for comedian Ernie Kovacs. The Prince and the Showgirl. Amazingly, not one of Marilyn Monroe's most popular movies, despite the fact she co-starred with Laurence Olivier. It did well in Britain, but not so hot in America. Public Pigeon No. 1, starring Red Skelton. This film is actually a feature-length remake of an episode of TV's Climax, also called Public Pigeon No. 1, and also starring Red Skelton. And it was made just 2 years earlier. Tammy and the Bachelor, starring Debbie Reynolds and Leslie Nielsen. This is the first of 4 Tammy movies, a light-hearted comedy series about a naive girl from Mississippi and her romantic adventures. It also inspired a short-lived TV series, Tammy, from 1965 to 66. Will success spoil Rock Hunter? Jane Mansfield had been in movies for 2 years. Some did better than others, especially The Girl Can't Help It from the year before. But this movie became her signature hit. Tony Randall is Rock Hunter. Adventure movies. Babyface Nelson. It may surprise some Mickey Rooney fans that he would ever play a bad guy. Babyface Nelson had been a real-life gangster who lived as brutally as he died. This put Rooney in a whole new light and was a far cry from his Andy Hardy days. The film was a financial success and kicked off a string of films where he played a tough guy. The Burglar, a crime film starring Dan Durea and Jane Mansfield. Don Quixote. The classic story has been made into a lot of movies. This was made in Soviet Russia and was the first Don Quixote film to be shot in both widescreen and color. Fire Down Below. This movie didn't do well at the time, and it's not very celebrated today. It starred 3 big-name actors, Rita Hayworth, Robert Mitchum, and Jack Lemmon. It was Hayworth's highly anticipated return to movies after a 4-year absence. The movie shouldn't have bombed, but it did. In show business, nothing is guaranteed. Jet Pilot, starring John Wayne and Janet Leigh. This movie, starring Wayne as an Air Force pilot, had a troubled production. It was produced by Howard Hughes, originally as an RKO Pictures movie. However, by the time this movie was finally released, Hughes had sold RKO to Universal. Filming had started in 1950 and, allegedly, did not finish until 1953. Hughes kept tinkering with the finished product and kept it from being released in a more timely manner. The movie touted the most current airplanes of the Air Force, but by the time the movie was released, the planes were either on the old side or obsolete. The final budget is reported to have ranged anywhere from $4 to $9 million. Absolutely incredible for the time. Ultimately, this movie didn't make much of an impression on the public. John Wayne thought it was one of his worst movies. Howard Hughes, however, considered this his favorite film, and allegedly watched it a lot in his later years. Johnny Tremaine. Disney made this movie for television, but first released it in theaters. It is set right before the outbreak of the American Revolutionary War. Legend of the Lost, starring John Wayne and Sophia Loren in a treasure hunting movie. My Gun is Quick. Robert Bray stars as the famous detective character Mike Hammer. Search for Paradise. This was actually a documentary film about the United States Air Force. It made a whole lot of money, and was actually one of the top grossing films this year. However, it's nowhere near as remembered as so many of the other movies from 1957. Witness for the prosecution. This legal mystery thriller made a lot of money. It had a big name cast, led by Tyrone Power and featuring Marlene Dietrich, Charles Lawton, and many others. Westerns. 3:10 to Yuma. The original version of this popular Western starred Glenn Ford. Decision at Sundown with Randolph Scott. Gunfight at the OK Corral. A majorly successful Western movie this year, starring Burt Lancaster as Wyatt Earp and Kirk Douglas as Doc Holliday. It wasn't meant to be historically accurate, but it was entertaining and made nothing but money. Night Passage. James Stewart is the hero and Audie Murphy, in a rare instance, is the villain. The Tin Star. A low-budget Western with a surprisingly big-name cast, led by Henry Fonda and Anthony Perkins in one of his first roles. It's one of the few B-Westerns that was ever nominated for an Oscar for Best Screenplay. Since this time, it has become a Western classic. Horror and science fiction movies. 20 Million Miles to Earth. A space monster invades the Earth. Abominable Snowman, starring Forrest Tucker and Peter Cushing. The Black Scorpion. Richard Denning and Mara Corday star in this film about giant black scorpions in Mexico. This movie, at the time, wasn't a fantastic moneymaker, but it gained cult status over the years, and a lot of people enjoy it in one way or another. Monster movie fans are quirky people. The Curse of Frankenstein, starring Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. This horror movie broke new ground in a number of different ways. Hammer Films made a lot of horror movies. This was their first horror movie in color, and their first Frankenstein film. It was also the first really gory horror movie, showing blood and guts in living color. It established Hammer Horror as a distinctive brand of horror cinema. The worldwide success of this film also allowed the company to release new versions of Dracula and the Mummy in 1958 and 1959 respectively. Their Dracula film, in particular, was so well received that it sparked a long, successful series establishing Christopher Lee as the most popular Dracula actor, second only to Bela Lugosi. The Deadly Mantis. A giant praying mantis wreaks havoc. The Giant Claw. About a giant monster bird. This is one of those bad movies that people seem to love as a guilty pleasure, and it's been a staple of the bootleg video market. It had very few official home video releases until the late 2000s. Since then, it has been more common to find on DVD. This is another example of something that was not a great hit at the time, but went on to become a classic of sorts. Incredible Shrinking Man, starring Grant Williams. This movie made money at the time, but it has grown even more well-liked as time has gone on. It was well done, especially for 1957, and made the whole idea of a microscopic person in a giant world really hip. The premise has been used countless times since then. Does Fantastic Voyage or Honey, I Shrunk the Kids come to mind? The Monster That Challenged the World. Tim Holt, who was best known as a Western star, saves the Earth from an army of giant mollusks, looking like caterpillars, that came from the sea. Quatermass 2. A sci-fi horror movie from Hammer Films. This is also believed to be the first ever film sequel to have a 2 suffix in the title. In this exciting sequel to the Quatermass experiment, the Professor hero saves the world from an alien invasion. The Seventh Seal. This Swedish film ultimately became known as a cinematic masterpiece, although it wasn't a huge moneymaker at the time. A knight, played by Max von Sydow, plays chess with the Grim Reaper, who has come to take his life. Will the knight beat death at chess and get to live? This is more of a fantasy drama film than true horror, but let's face it, the Grim Reaper is pretty scary. Drama and romance movies. 12 Angry Men. Henry Fonda was the lead of an all-star cast in this intense courtroom drama centered on the jurors. This is often regarded as one of the best movies ever made. An Affair to Remember, a romance film with Cary Grant and Deborah Kerr. Bo James. This is the second of only 2 dramatic roles for the legendary comedian Bob Hope. His first was the film Seven Little Foys, released 2 years earlier, but that had a lot of comedic moments. After all, it was based on the life of vaudeville star Eddie Foy. This film, however, was based on Jimmy Walker, the controversial mayor of New York from 1926 to 1932, and is quite a bit darker. Bridge on the River Kwai. This movie was major super big time huge. To this day, if you're not familiar with the film, you've probably heard the title mentioned by someone. This was the highest grossing movie of the year in America, Canada, and Britain. It's acclaimed as one of the greatest war films ever made. William Holden was the lead. It also starred Alec Guinness. The D.I. A lot of people may not realize that Jack Webb did other things besides Dragnet, but this is one of them. It's a military drama about Marine life, and Webb plays the toughest of all drill instructors. Edge of the City, starring Sidney Poitier. This movie was considered unusual for the time due to its portrayal of an interracial friendship. Island in the Sun. This was a moneymaker, but highly controversial due to its on-screen portrayal of an interracial relationship between Joan Fontaine and Harry Belafonte. This was also Dorothy Dandridge's comeback movie after a 3-year absence. A Face in the Crowd. Andy Griffith in a drama movie? A lot of other people felt that way too. At the time, the movie didn't do all that well, but audiences liked Andy Griffith. This movie launched him into stardom. Since its original release, though, the movie has become better liked. A Farewell to Arms, starring Rock Hudson and Jennifer Jones. This was the second movie based on Ernest Hemingway's novel and a monster hit this year. It made so much money. Heaven Knows, Mr. Allison, with Robert Mitchum and Deborah Kerr. Man of a Thousand Faces. James Cagney stars in this biographical film about horror movie actor Lon Chaney. Roger Smith played his son, the legendary Lon Chaney Jr. The real Lon Chaney Jr., who was still alive and quite active, was not in the film. This film is not an entirely accurate account about the lives of the Cheneys, but it was a success. Old Yeller. This Disney film, a Western drama, was a smash success. What people remember most about this film is one of the most tearful moments in cinematic history. A boy has to shoot Old Yeller, his dog. What isn't remembered as much is the fact that the movie doesn't end there. The boy gets one of Old Yeller's pups and names him Young Yeller. What's remembered even less is the fact that this legendary film had an official sequel in 1963 called Savage Sam that didn't do anywhere near as well as this movie. Peyton Place. This movie was a smash hit, the ultimate soap opera. It had a large cast full of name actors headed by Lana Turner. It was also full of bad doings and other taboo subjects, including incest and rape. Heavy stuff for 1957. People liked this movie so much that it had a sequel in 1961, a TV series from 1964 to 69, and a revival series from 1972 to 74. The things that went on in Peyton Place were so messed up that the very name of it became synonymous with sexual scandal. Raintree County. So many big names in this Civil War era romance film. The top 3 were Montgomery Clift, Elizabeth Taylor, and Eva Marie Saint. This made a lot of money, but it cost a lot, and still lost roughly $500,000. Saint Joan, a biographical film about Joan of Arc. Sayonara. Marlon Brando was the lead of this all-star cast. It was a major moneymaker where Brando played an Air Force fighter pilot who falls in love with a Japanese dancer. The Spirit of St. Louis. James Stewart plays legendary pilot Charles Lindbergh. Musicals. Musicals were really hurting by 1957 and on their way out. Why? There are a number of reasons. Since talking pictures began, there had been musicals. A lot of them. And the genre just played out. Times had changed, and this kind of music wasn't as popular anymore. It was the rock and roll era. Also, doing good musicals was getting too costly, and there simply wasn't enough profit to be made. Musicals have never completely died off. It simply moved to television when variety shows were still huge. A lot of movies, well into the 1960s, would feature one or two musical numbers. However, the era of film musicals, being a major movie genre, was coming to a close. April Love, with Shirley Jones and Pat Boone. Funny Face, with Audrey Hepburn and Fred Astaire. When this movie was first released in theaters, it flopped hard. Years later, in 1964, Audrey Hepburn did the hugely successful movie My Fair Lady. Right after that, Funny Face was re-released in theaters and drew huge crowds, finally turning a profit. Timing is everything. The Joker is Wild. Frank Sinatra starred in this biographical musical about the real-life singing star Joe E. Lewis. It was a success, and Sinatra actually became friends with the real Joe E. Lewis because of it. Les Girls, Gene Kelly's last MGM musical and a commercial disappointment. The Pajama Game, starring Doris Day and John Raitt, Bonnie Raitt's dad. Pal Joey. Unlike a lot of musicals this year, Pal Joey was a big monster hit. It starred Frank Sinatra, Rita Hayworth, and Kim Novak. Film debuts of 1957. All of these people would enjoy long, successful acting careers, but their film debuts weren't always memorable. Norman Alden as the Master of Ceremonies in Hear Me Good. Alden never became a megastar, but he was a good actor who worked a lot. Some of the films and TV shows he did were beneath his talent, but he could make even a terrible production passable. Alan Arkin as the lead singer of the Terriers, an actual folk music group, in Calypso Heatwave. Arkin went on to have a fantastic career, and he's gotten even better with age. Alain Delon as Joe in Send a Woman When the Devil Fails. This French actor became one of Europe's greatest sex symbols in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. He's had an incredible career. Delon could never quite make it big in America, but he's well known to a lot of Americans for playing Zorro in the 1975 film of the same name. Catherine Deneuve as schoolgirl in The Twilight Girls. She was only 12 when this movie was made, but ultimately became one of the sexiest, most successful French actresses of all time. Ben Gazzara as Jaco de Paris, the antagonistic lead of The Strange One. Gazzara played good guys and bad guys, but he always seemed to excel at playing bad guys. This movie was also the film debut of Georges Papard as Cadet Robert Marquardt. Clifton James also made his film debut in The Strange One as Colonel M.N. Ramsey. I like this guy. His name may not be recognizable to you, but you have most likely seen him in some movie or TV show from the 70s and 80s. He seemed to specialize in playing dim-witted, occasionally racist Southern sheriffs, always in a comedic vein. He was Sheriff J.W. Pepper in the James Bond movies Live and Let Die and The Man with the Golden Gun. Clifton played a similar character in the Richard Pryor movie Silver Streak and Superman 2, as well as the pilot episode of TV's Heart to Heart. He didn't just play Southern sheriffs, but this became a recognizable stock character. Clifton had a way of playing likable buffoons, even if they had bad traits. That's a talent. William Hickey as Apples in A Hatful of Rain. Hickey seemed to specialize in playing funny, creepy, or otherwise quirky guys in a wide variety of comedy movies and other offbeat films. Sally Kellerman as Marcia in Reform School Girl. She did have a successful career, but her breakout role was the original Hot Lips Houlihan in the 1970 film MASH. Lee Remick as Betty Lou Fleckham in A Face in the Crowd. She pretty much stayed a dramatic actress for her entire career. Ray Walston as Lieutenant McCann in Kiss Them For Me. His breakout success did not come until 1963 with the TV series My Favorite Martian. After that, he worked a lot playing all kinds of funny, quirky characters. The only thing that slowed his career down in the mid-1990s was poor health. Even then, he worked right up until the end. Adam West as Weather Station No. 4 radio operator in Voodoo Island. He wasn't always Batman. As a matter of fact, nothing he did from 1957 to 1966 would ever have tipped you off to him becoming Batman. When the classic TV series started in 1966, his name became synonymous with the character. There would be many other Batman actors, but anytime you hear Adam West, the first thing you think is Batman. What a fascinating year. I hope you enjoyed your stay. A lot of new things were falling into place, while a lot of old things were going by the wayside. It happens, but not always like it did this year. Come back to my video time machine whenever you want to revisit the year 1957.